witnesses in the Yemeni capital Sanaa have told Reuters they have heard 3 explosions. Let's talk to Matt Spence, who's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and former White House National Security Council senior advisor during the Obama administration. Matt, hello, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Henry, for having me.
Now, it appears, and this is according to Reuters, that the strikes have been carried out by aircraft, ships and submarine. Your reaction initially?
I think my initial reaction is this is an important show of force to back up what was an important diplomatic statement last week. These attacks on shipping vessels are enormously destructive and dangerous for the international community, our economy, and shipping. And diplomacy and statements without the threat of force and without the use of force, if the threats are ignored, are feckless. So I think right now this is an expected response to what has been an increasingly destabilizing situation.
Well, there have been 27 attacks, including drone strikes and the boarding and seizing of ships and crew since the 19th of November. But how serious will these retaliatory strikes have to be in order to force the Houthis and Iran to back down?
Strikes of this nature usually are trying to have accomplished 2 goals. One is to degrade the capability of the Houthis to do this again. And then the second is to deter the Houthis and the Iranians who back the Houthis from taking further action. It's too early to tell, probably, what the impact of the degradation on Houthi capabilities are, but to show that when the international community makes a statement that this will not stand, it cannot continue, and there is action taken to follow that up, I think that's an important signal and a very important message.
Matt, you say the international community, but as far as we know, only the US and UK have carried out these strikes. We may hear about other countries as the night unfolds, but in the initial 10 countries, or 12 should I say, that were mentioned by US and UK spokespersons, they included Bahrain, Canada, Australia, France, and others. How important is it that other countries, particularly non-Western countries, took part in this action or will take part in imminent action?
Well, look, I would say from a military operation perspective, the fact that it was the United States and the UK, I think, is not surprising. Just from an operational level, you want to have as many countries you can involved in a diplomatic statement. In a military operation, you want to have the countries that are necessary in the coalition to execute with precision and to accomplish the goal and limit the harm to our service members. So I would not read into the fact at this point, though things can change, that it's the U.S. and the U.K. I do think that continuing to make sure that this is not a U.S.-UK effort, that this is a group of countries now led by the U.S. and the U.K. executing on behalf of a larger coalition remains important. I think as we look forward, right now, I think we can see what the reaction from these other countries would be. And obviously, it doesn't make any sense to telegraph our punches before we hit them. So they're not going to be a statement before. This is breaking news. But I would also like to see some statements of support from some of the other players to emphasize that this really is action on behalf of the coalition.
Well, that will be interesting to see whether Egypt or Bahrain or other countries like Saudi do add their names, even if they haven't added their military hardware or their forces. Right. I see from my sources that this is a massive, Matt, I see from sources and monitoring various wires that this has been built as a massive retaliatory strike. The danger is that it's not just positions and launchers that are hit, but civilians too.
Look, when I was at the Defense Department and the White House, our clear operating procedure is to do everything we can to limit civilian casualties and to limit that. So I have no doubt that that's been a key guiding principle. Unfortunately, when the Houthis and Iranians and others are attacking that you can try to be precise as possible, I don't know what the impact has been. Obviously, it's important to minimize this as a moral issue, an issue of international law, and also against what would be any further blowback against the United States. So I don't think we know more than. I would imagine these are focused on military targets to degrade future capabilities. It's a very different stance, which I think what some of these other attacks try to do when they're directed towards us.
I see Houthi officials are being quoted and they're posting on social media saying we will discipline them, God willing, and they're promising to launch massive counterattacks. How concerned should the US and Britain be for their assets in the area, their ships, their personnel, but also further afield, back here in the US, or back here in the UK, should I say, and where you are in the US?
Well, look, with anything, I think the issue is we always need to be prepared and always need to make sure that we're watching out what is happening. I mean, look, already there have been at least 130 attacks by Iranian-backed militia on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria since October, just 3 this week. We have enormous assets on personnel. We have bases at Al Dhafra, at Al Udeid, in UAE and Qatar, respectively, American and British service members stationed throughout. So we need to continue to harden our forces and look at this. I think about looking at threats in the homeland, of course, like protecting what's within our borders is always the critical piece that we're looking after. I'm not aware of any new intelligence that shows they have the reach or the capacity to do that. But in this business, only the paranoid survive. And we need to continue to be vigilant about that. But the threat of retaliation cannot give the Houthis a license to continue to threaten international shipping and threaten the lives of others within the region and cow us into a position to do nothing.
And how much support do you think these strikes will have both on Capitol Hill and beyond in the United States? Because we all know just how reluctant some Americans, particularly on the Republican right, are to engage in further foreign military adventures.
Look, I would hope that we can think to an era when politics stop at the water's edge. I mean, there are 3 characteristics of this strike, which I think really should commend bipartisan support. First, we're not putting U.S. service members on the ground directly in harm's way. We have brave pilots, of course, and those piloting our ships who are definitely in danger, but it's the type of force that is very different from what it could be. Second, the United States is not acting alone. There's a diplomatic coalition. Even the coordination and execution of these strikes are done with others. And then third, opposing the Houthis and opposing Iranian support for violence and destabilization in the Middle East is not a partisan issue. This is something that the cost, both in diplomatic time and financial resources, is far less than what could be used if we were not to do something at all. So I imagine that senior leaders on Capitol Hill have been briefed. I imagine there's strong efforts to get this underway. And I would hope that the very obvious case that this should be received bipartisan support. It doesn't matter if there's a Democrat or a White House or a Republican in the White House responding to this. This is a threat that needs action taken, and hopefully that's the response that we'll see.
Yeah.